Have her come to the back court, your grace, truly. There will be ladies in the hall on Thursday, and one cannot ask them to look at that over the soup. The Duke of Ancroft did not answer at once, and the room went on talking, because rooms did go on talking when he came into them that year. He had been a duke 11 months and had not yet learned how to make one stop. Look at what, Lady Ordish, the hands, your grace. And the jaw. She said it pleasantly over a glass, in the voice of a woman explaining a difficulty with drains. 10 years and she still will not wear a glove indoors. My sister was quite unwell after the Beaulieu fair. One does not blame the creature, it was not her doing, one supposes. But there is a difference between charity and the dinner table. Miss Frey makes the best red glass in England, then let her make it in her shed. He should have said, at that moment, one of a dozen things. He said, very well. She may deal with my steward, and use the back court, and there is an end of it, and turned to the fire, and Lady Ordish said he was so very sensible. And it was another 4 seconds before he saw the footman standing in the doorway, with the leather roll in his hands and the woman waiting behind him. Grizel Frey had heard all of it. He knew she had. He watched her decide not to show it. In 4 months' time the Duke of Ancroft would stand up at a public dinner in his own county and take that room to pieces, board by board, in front of every person seated at it. And it would cost him his agent, his father's good name, and nearly all of what he had been brought up to believe about the house he came from. He would count that a bargain. What he was never afterwards able to forgive himself, that it took him the 4 months, and that she had done the hard part first, alone, with the whole parish watching. Your Grace. She came in and set the roll on the table and unbuckled it, and she did it with her hands bare, in a room of 11 people who were all now looking at. The burn ran up the back of the right hand and over the wrist and into the sleeve. A second, older-looking seam came up the side of the throat and stopped short of the jaw. The trials for the East Light. 3 rubies, 3 blues, and the pot metal green your chapel had in the 1440s, which nobody in England has struck since the year 70, and which I have struck twice. Miss Frey, the back court is nearer the road and the light is better, she said. I shall use it gladly. If your Grace will have the samples carried to the window, the ruby wants sun to be judged, and this room has none. At the time he had the samples carried to the window and said nothing whatever about the back court. The Frey glasshouse stood at Harrow Mill, 1.5 miles below the Ancroft Park wall. One long cone of blackened brick with the furnace at its heart, a pot arch, 2 annealing ovens, a cutting shop and 41 men. Peregrine had been through it once, in June, in the manner of a new landlord being shown things. He remembered heat like a hand on the face, and a boy running with a pole, and the noise, the constant, oceanic roar of a furnace that had not been allowed to go out in 22 years, because if it went out the pots cracked and the works were finished. He remembered, too, that nobody in that building had looked at Miss Frey's hands even once. 41 men, his steward said afterwards, and every one of them a house in Harrow Mill, your Grace. Father's works. He died in the fire in the year 10, and she has had it since. She was 19. 19. Aye. And Mr. Nash of Beaulieu has offered for it twice, and she will not sell. And Mr. Nash has the ear of every subscriber in the county. And the bank at Cawley holds her note for £900, which falls due at the old quarter day. The steward coughed. And her coal comes off Ancroft ground, your Grace, at Ancroft prices, which your father set in the year 6 and never once looked at again. So there it was, laid out like a hand of cards, 41 families, £900, a bank, a rival, and a duke who could raise the price of coal with a sentence. She could not refuse him. That was the plain shape of it. She could not refuse the commission, and she could not refuse the back court, and she could not refuse to be discussed over the soup at Ancroft by women who would buy her glass all their lives and never once say her name. Peregrine found that he disliked the shape of it very much, and that he had, that afternoon, made it worse by 1 degree, and that not one person in his own drawing-room had thought him anything but sensible. He rode down to Harrow Mill on the Friday without sending word. The cutting shop was cold. It was the only cold room in the place, and she was the bench with a lamp behind a globe of water, engraving the trial of the green, and she did not stop when he came in. Your Grace, mind the frit, Miss Frey. On Thursday, in my house, I agreed to something in front of 11 people that I have not been able to put down since. The wheel slowed. She lifted the glass, looked through it at the lamp, and set it in the rack. You agreed that I should use the back court, she said. So I shall. It is nearer the road. That is not what I agreed to. No, said Grizzle Frey, but it is what I am able to use. Gentlemen, the question before the subscription is a simple one. Do we set the memorial window in glass made by a respectable house, or by a woman in an apron who cannot keep her own furnace insured? Mr. Nash, said Peregrine, you may sit down. I shall sit when I have said it, your grace, with respect. 14 of us have put money into that chapel. We are entitled to a manufacturer. We can put in a subscription list without an explanation. The long room over the Corley assembly was full. 14 subscribers, 3 clergymen, Lady Ordish and her sister at the end with their chairs turned in, and a table down the middle with the trial pieces on white linen. Nash's samples at one end, Miss Frey's at the other, and between them the drawings for the east window of the Ancroft chapel, which Peregrine had commissioned for his father and his brother, and had begun to think of as the only useful thing he had done since the funeral. May I answer, your grace? You may. Grizzle Frey came to the table. She had not worn gloves. Peregrine had watched her put them on in the passage and take them off again and put them in her pocket, and he had not understood, until that moment, that it was a decision she made fresh every time she went through a door. Mr. Nash's ruby, she said, is a good colour. There, said Nash. You hear her. It is a good colour for 11 years. It is flashed, a skin of copper ruby laid on white metal, thin as a wetted page, because pot ruby wants 2 pounds of gold to the ton and 9 hours of a man's whole attention. She lifted the piece and turned its scored edge to the window. There. You may see the skin with your own eyes, gentlemen. It is a hair. When it weathers it goes patchy, and then it goes pink. That is your opinion. No. It is the north light of Bewley Church, which your house glazed in the year 11. She set a second piece on the linen. Ruby gone the colour of a weak cordial, crazed like a dry pond. I paid the sexton a shilling for that on Tuesday. 9 winters. In 9 winters the memorial to his Grace's father and brother would look like that, and it would be nobody's fault but by then, because we should all be dead and the money spent. Nobody said anything for a moment. A clergyman put his spectacles on. And your ruby, Miss Frey? Peregrine asked. Struck through. Gold in the pot the old way. It cannot fade, because there is nothing on it to come off. The colour is the glass. She laid her own piece beside the ruined one, and the difference went through that room like a change of weather. I make 11 pieces to get 4. It is why I am dear. I would rather be dear than be sorry in front of a parish. Very fine, said Lady Ordish, from the end. Though one would like to be sure that a woman so unlucky with fire is the safest person to be trusted with a furnace. The room laughed. Not loudly. That was the thing Peregrine never afterwards forgot. It was not a cruel roar, it was a comfortable little ripple, the laugh of people who had made that joke for 10 years and had worn it smooth. Perhaps she might wear gloves, said Nash, and spare the subscribers. Peregrine began to rise. He got as far as putting his hand on the table. I have gloves in my pocket, Mr. Nash, Grizzle Frey said, without any particular emphasis. I take them off to judge colour, because glass lies to you through kid. If the gentlemen would rather have a well-dressed hand than a true red, they have only to say so, and the window will fade, and we shall all be very genteel about in 9 years. She turned to the subscribers. The estimate is £840, half on setting, half at the consecration. Mr. Nash's is 600. I would take the 600 myself if I believed him. The vote was 11-3. Nash took it well in public and not at all well at the door, where Peregrine happened to be standing, and where Nash said, to nobody in particular, that the Corley Bank held her note, and that the old quarter-day came round every year like a magistrate. Afterwards the subscribers went down to their dinner, and Peregrine stayed in the long room while the servants cleared, and Grizzle Frey wrapped her trial pieces one at a time in flannel. Miss Frey, may I ask you something you will dislike? You may ask. Your hands. That is not a question, your grace, it is a subject. Then here is the question. He was looking at them now, properly, for the first time, and the more he looked the less the county's version stood up. Everyone tells me you were caught in the fire at Harrow Mill. Caught? I have seen a man caught in a fire. He burns along the back and the outside. He burns turning away. He stopped because his voice had done something he had not authorized. You are burned on the fingers and on the palms and along the inside of the arms, and the mark on your throat is on the left, where a person turns her face while she keeps going forward. She wrapped the last piece of ruby in its flannel and set it in the box, and closed the box and looked up. "Good night, Your Grace," said Grizel Frey. He stood in that emptied room for a long time after she had gone, and the thing he could not put down was not the scars at all. It was that in 10 years, in a county that had made a small comfortable joke of them, not one person had ever bothered to work out which direction they ran. You are standing where the boy runs, Your Grace. 2 steps left, and do not put your hand on that rail. It has been hot since the year 8. Through July and August the Duke of Ancroft came down to Harrow Mill after dark, 3 and 4 nights a week, and stood 2 steps left of where the boy ran. The cone at night was the best thing he had ever seen. A hole of white light where the furnace mows, and around it men moving in a rhythm nobody called out, the long irons going in dark and coming out with a lump of sun on the end. The heat pushed on his face like a flat palm. The noise sat under everything, a low roar you stopped hearing and then felt in your teeth. Why does nobody speak? Because everyone knows. Pike has been on that chair 31 years and I have never once told him anything. Grizel stood with her arms folded, watching the gaffer's hands. The glass tells you when. If you have to be told, you are too late. And you learned it at 19. I learned it at 7, standing where you are standing and being shouted at. I took it at 19. There is a difference. She glanced at him. You come at night, Your Grace. The days are full. Everybody's days are full. I have been in night business for 10 years. The back court, the tradesman's door, the room after the ladies have gone up. I do not say it to sting you. I say it because you seem to think I have not noticed. He did not come the following night. He came the one after, and she handed him a pair of goggles without a word, which he understood, correctly, to be the largest thing anybody had said to him that summer. He learned things. That she had rebuilt the pot arch herself in the year 15 with money-made engraving decanters at 4 shillings each, 311 of them. That she had never once asked for the coal cheaper, because a favour can be taken back and a contract cannot. That 160 souls in Harrow Mill lived off that hole of white light, and that if the furnace went out a fortnight the pots would crack, and it would cost £1,100 to start again, money that did not exist anywhere in her world. I will pay the whole 840 in advance, he said on the last night of August. Tonight. It would take the bank off your back until spring. No, Miss Frey. Half on setting and half at the consecration as contracted, as the subscribers voted, as it is written. She did not even look up from the drawing. Your Grace, if you pay me before the glass is in the stone, then it is not a commission, it is a subscription to a distressed woman, and every man in that long room at Cawley will know it by Thursday, and I will never sell another window in this county. Nash would not need to say a word. He would only need to smile, and if the bank will not wait, then it will not wait, and I shall meet it. She rolled the drawing. You cannot make this safe for me. You can only make it fair, and you have, and I am obliged to you, and now go home. It is 2 in the morning, and you have magistrates at 10. He rode back up the hill with the furnace glow behind him on the underside of the smoke, and thought about the phrase, you can only make it fair, for a great deal longer than was comfortable. The bishop's chaplain came in the 2nd week of September. So did Nash. So, in the way of these things did Lady Ordish, who had discovered a passion for the chapel restoration at the exact moment it became fashionable. They stood in the roofless little chapel with the east opening bare to the sky, and the new stone tracery finished and pale, and the chaplain consulted his book. His lordship can be in the county on the 18th of October, Your Grace, St. Luke's Day. He would prefer it. The memorial to your father and brother falls very properly on a saint's day, and the county will come out for a bishop, the 18th then, and the window must be in the stone and sound 8 days before, for the surveyor. It will be, said Grizel. It is 9 lights and the tracery. The rubies are struck, the blues are struck, the green is struck, the cartoons are cut, It will be leaded by the last week of September and set in the first week of October, and you may bring your surveyor with a ladder and I will hold it." "Charming," said Lady Ordish. "One does hope she will be somewhere out of the sun on the day. The glare is so trying to a marked complexion." Nash laughed, and Peregrine turned on him, and Nash held up both hands and got in first, pleasantly, in the voice of a laying a card face up on a table. "No offence in the world, your grace, and Miss Frey knows I bear her none. My offer stands, and I'll say it here so there's no whispering. £900 for the Harrow Mill works, plant, pots, cone and goodwill, which is, to the penny, what she owes the Cawley Bank. And I'll be honest as a Christian, since we're in a church. Her note falls due on the old quarter day. That's the 18th of October. Same morning as the bishop." He put his hat on. "My money's on the table till noon that day, and not a minute after. Then it's the bank's business, and the bank's business is Cawley's, and Cawley's is mine. Hold still. It is a small burn, and you will make it a large one by being a duke about it. I touched the rail. You touched the rail. 31 years Pike has kept off that rail." Grizzle turned his wrist to the lamp and laid the wet lint on, and her hands were exactly as warm and as steady as any other pair of hands. And Peregrine sat on a cutting-shop stool at 1:30 in the morning and did not trust himself to speak for a moment. "You may ask now," she said. "You have been not asking since August, and it is making you clumsy. The fire, the 11th of March in the year 10. It went up in the pot arch about 9 at night. She wound the linen. There is a plate of iron sets between the arch and the flue, and it was not there. Nobody has ever known why. The roof was pitch and old timber. 4 minutes, and there was no going out by the door. And you were in the counting house with the books, which is why I have a face at all." She tied the bandage off. "I went in through the sand store 4 times. The 4th was for my father, and my father was already gone, and I have been glad since that I did not know it at the time. I should have stopped." Peregrine said nothing at all, which was, he thought afterwards, the only wholly right thing he did that month. "They call it my accident," she said. "I have let them. It is easier to be pitied for bad luck than to be looked at for anything else, and I had 41 men a note at the bank and no time to educate a county." She began putting the lint away. "That is more than I have said aloud in 10 years, your grace, and I would take it kindly if you'd not make a use of it." "May I make one use of it?" "No. Your name goes on the brass," he said, "under my father's and my brother's, where it belongs, Grizzle Frey of Harrow Mill, glassmaker. And you will stand at the front on St. Luke's Day with the light coming through your own window onto every face in that chapel, and if one person in this county so much as looks at you sideways, I will say a great deal more than they will enjoy." She looked at him for a long moment. "Very well," said Grizzle Frey. It was the nearest thing to happiness he had since his brother died, and it lasted 11 days. The window went into the stone in the first week of October, 9 lights and the tracery, and the surveyor came with a ladder and pronounced it sound, and on the 10th the chapel stood full of a red that made grown men go quiet. On the 11th the chaplain came up to the house with the order of service in proof, and Lady Ordish came with him, and there was an archdeacon's letter, and it all took 2 hours and was done entirely in the language of regret. It is not a question of the woman, your grace. It is a question of what may be printed in an order of consecration. The maker of a memorial light is properly given as the house, the Harrow Mill Glasshouse, and his lordship's chaplain assures me that a personal name, and a woman's name, in a consecration service, would want a faculty and a deal of correspondence, and there is not the time. And the setting, said Nash's Alley among the subscribers, wants a certificate. It is the usual thing. Messrs. Nash of Bewley will certify the setting and be named as setters, and then the subscribers are covered, and no one need argue. She set it herself, Peregrine said. She was on the scaffold at 6 in the morning for 4 days, and nobody doubts it. It is a matter of form, your grace. Then Lady Ordish, gently over her tea, with her head a little on one side, and forgive me, but you must think of the day. It is your father's memorial and your brother's. If that poor creature stands at the front, the whole county will spend the service looking at her face instead of at their names. Is that what you want for your brother? Truly? He should have thrown all 3 of them down the steps, he said, Print the house, let Nash certify the setting, and I will speak to Miss Frey myself. He rode down to Harrow Mill on the 12th of October with the proof in his pocket, and he stood in the cutting shop and said the whole of it, in order, in his own voice, and he heard himself use the word spare you. She listened to the end. She did not interrupt once. Will your father's brass carry his name? She asked. Yes. And your brother's? Yes. Then I understand the rule. She set the engraving wheel spinning and stopped it again with one finger. 10 years, your grace, I have been a backcourt after dark, tradesman's door business, and I made my peace with it because the people who did it to me had never once thought about it at all. You have thought about it. You sat on that stool 11 days ago with my bandage on your wrist. And you have decided that the smoothest day for you is a day I am not in. Grizzle, you need not come again before the 18th. The window is set and sound, and it will be there when we are all dead, whose of a name is under it. She turned back to the wheel. Good night, your grace. He did not sleep. At midnight he was on the hill road above Harrow Mill with no notion of what he meant to say, and he pulled his horse up hard, because the whole valley was alight. Every lamp in the yard was burning. The cone was going like a lighthouse. There were men on the roof of the cutting shop with lanterns, and a cart being loaded in the lane, and the ring of a mallet on stone somewhere, and 41 men working at 2 in the morning 6 days before a bishop. Pike was at the gate with a lantern, and he did not open it. Evening, your grace. The old man was perfectly civil. Miss Frey's compliments, and the works is shut to visitors tonight. Shut to? Pike, what is she doing? Working, said Pike, and lifted the lantern to see him better, and did not say another word. And the east light, given in memory of the late Duke and of his elder son, made by the Harrow Mill glasshouse and set by Messrs. Nash of Bewley. The chaplain's voice went up into the new roof and came down again, and there was that soft rustle a congregation makes when it approves of itself, and Mr. Nash, in the third pew on the right, inclined his head to the county with the modesty of a man who has been given something he did not make. Said Luke's Day, 10 in the morning. Every seat in the Ancroft chapel taken, the bishop in his chair, the subscribers in a row, Lady Ordish in the second pew, and above them all the east window, 9 lights and the tracery, with the low autumn sun coming through so that the whole congregation sat in a red the colour of a heart. Peregrine was at the front, penned between a bishop and an archdeacon, and had been sitting in that red for 40 minutes thinking about a woman on a scaffold at 6 in the morning. Chapel door opened at the back. She came up the aisle in her working clothes. Not defiantly, there had simply been no time to change, and by look of her there had been no time to sleep either. She had come from the works with the smell of the cone still on her, an apron folded over her arm and a paper in her hand and her gloves on. Forgive me, my Lord Bishop, she said. I have business with the subscribers, and I am told there is no other room I am to be in. Really, said Lady Ordish, quite audibly, in a church. And on such a day, could I not at least have what, madam? Grizzle Frey stopped level with the second pew. Say the whole of it. You have been saying half of it for 10 years, and I have never once made you finish. Nobody breathed. Peregrine got as far as the end of the front pew, and found the archdeacon's knees and a churchwarden between him and the aisle. You have all had 10 years of my hands, she said, to the church. I know what is said. At the Bewley Fair and over the soup, and in the assembly rooms at Corley in July. It is a small joke, and it has worn very smooth. So here they are, and then I shall do my business and go. She pulled the gloves off, one and then the other, and put them in her apron, and held up her hands in the red light. The 11th of March in the year 10. The podarch went up at 9 at night with 11 men inside the cone. I went in through the sand store 4 times. The first time I brought out Jem Attercliffe, who is in the 4th pew from the back with his wife, and who has coughed every winter since. The second time I brought out 2 men who could walk if somebody went in front of them. The third time I brought out Pike's son, who could not walk and who is at the Harrow Mill works this minute, minding my furnace so that I may stand in your church. The 4th time I went in for my father, and my father was already dead, and I could not carry him, and I have thought about that every day for 10 years and shall think about it for the rest. She turned her hands over, palms up. These are not an accident. These are a receipt. 4 men and a roof and 41 families that still eat. If you want to laugh at the price, laugh. It is paid, and I would pay it again on Thursday. The silence in that chapel had wait. It pressed. Now the business. She unfolded her paper. £840 was voted for the East Light. 420 was paid on setting. 420 falls due today, and the treasurer of the subscription is in the 5th pew, and I will have it now, in this room, in front of the people who voted it, because I am done with back doors. The treasurer, Scarlett, came forward and counted it into her hand. I thank you. At noon I am at the Corley Bank, where my father's note of £900 falls due, and I shall meet it. 420 from this, 420 from the Bristol order, and £60 that 41 of us made these last 6 nights working dark to dark. Which is why I am not in a better coat. She folded the paper. So Mr. Nash may keep his money. Harrow Mill is not for sale today, nor next quarter day, nor while I am alive. The order of service, said Nash thinly, names my house as setters. It does. I set that window myself off a scaffold in 4 days in the first week of October, and every man here who has been near the chapel knows it, and I have not come to argue with a printed page. She looked up once at the East Light, and the red went over her face and her throat and her hands and made them all one colour. I was told I need not come today. I have come. I made that red. There is not another house in England that could have struck it, and in 400 years, when the names on the brass are worn smooth, that glass will still be doing what I built it to do, and that is the only monument I ever wanted, and nobody can take it out of the wall. She turned and went down the aisle. Peregrine was on his feet by then. He got clear of the pew and 3 paces up the flags, and he was still 11 yards behind her when she reached the door, and the door shut, and there was nothing in his hands at all. And then, in the middle of that silence, an old man in his best coat stood up at the end of the 7th pew. Your Grace. Pike's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. There's a thing I've held 10 year, and I'll not hold it another day. Say it. That iron fire plate as should have sat between the arch and the flue. It never fell out, and it never wore out. 2 men took it away on a cart the afternoon of the 11th of March, and I saw who set them on. The old man's hand came up, quite steady, and pointed across the aisle. He was your father's coal agent then. He'd condemned that plate in the winter, and the renewing was £70, and he sold it for scrap and pocketed the difference. And when I went up to the big house after the burying, your father's steward told me the village would want its coal cheap next winter, and I was to hold my tongue. Pike looked at the bishop and then at the duke, and I did, 10 year. And I've sat here this morning and listened to that lass count her hands. At 10 minutes before noon, your Grace, in golden notes and a Bristol draft for 111. The clerk asked would she not wait for a gentleman to sign with her, and she said she had signed for that works 10 years, and the ink had never once complained, and the bank was satisfied. Cancelled and stamped, said his steward. She walked back to Harrow Mill and went on shift. Peregrine had spent the afternoon in the muniment room with 2 candles and a locksmith, and came out at 5 with his coat grey with dust, a bundle of his father's estate correspondence under his arm, and a magistrate's clerk trotting after him taking down old Pike's words in a fair hand. The subscription dinner was at 7 at the Corley Assembly Rooms, 90 covers, the bishop at the head, the 14 subscribers, the county in its good coats, and Mr. Nash of Bewley 2 seats from the top with his glass already up. Being congratulated on the setting of the finest window in the north, the room did not stop talking when the Duke of Ancroft came in. It never had. He had been a Duke 11 months and had never once known how to make a room stop, and he had told himself that this was modesty, and it had never been anything of the kind. He walked the length of the table, laid 3 papers down on the cloth between the candlesticks, and stood there. The talk went out in pieces, table by table, the way a fire got along a wet log, the near end, then the middle, then a woman laughing alone at the far corner and stopping, until there was no sound in the assembly rooms at Corley but a spoon somebody had not managed to put down quietly. "Sit still, Mr. Nash," said the Duke of Ancroft. "There are 2 magistrates at this table, and the door is attended." Nobody moved at all. "This is a letter of the 4th of January, in the year 10, from my father's coal agent, recommending that the iron fireplate at the Harrow Mill glasshouse be condemned and renewed at a cost of £70. This is my father's answer, in my father's hand, refused, and no more of this. And this is the sworn statement, taken at 4 o'clock this afternoon, of Josiah Pike, who watched that plate carried out of the potlatch on a cart on the afternoon of the 11th of March, and who was told by my father's steward that Harrow Mill would want its coal cheap next winter, and that he should hold his tongue. He held it 10 years. He held it in front of every one of you. He let them look at the papers. £70, that is what my family declined to spend. 4 men came out of that building because a girl of 19 went in 4 times for them, and a 5th did not come out at all, and the whole of it was bought and paid for with £70 and a quiet word. That is the house I come from. I have known it since 2 o'clock this afternoon, and I am telling 90 people at once so that I can never be tempted to tell it in a smaller room. Somebody at the bottom of the table said, "Good God," and the bishop closed his eyes. And then there is what this county did with it. He picked up the 3rd paper, the printed order of service. For 10 years you have made a small joke out of a woman's hands, a comfortable joke, well polished. It was made in my own drawing room in June, and I answered it by agreeing that she should use the back court. 11 days ago I struck her name off this paper to keep my day smooth, and I told her, I used the words, that it was to spare her. He tore it in half and let it drop. She set that window herself off a scaffold at 6 in the morning for 4 days. Mr. Nash certified a setting he never touched. This is void. The brass will be recut before Christmas. My father's name, my brother's, and beneath them Grizzle Frey of Harrow Mill, glassmaker, and beneath that the 4 men she carried out by name, so that nobody here need ever again wonder which way her scars run. Lady Ordish had got very small in her chair. He turned to her last and spoke gently, which was worse. "Madam, you asked whether I wanted the county looking at her face during my brother's memorial. Yes, I did. I want every person in this room to look at her until it is not remarkable, and then to go on looking, because she is the best maker of glass in England, and she has been standing in your back courts for 10 years while you bought her work and would not say her name." He straightened. The Ancroft estate owes the Harrow Mill glasshouse a debt. Not a gift. She would refuse a gift, and she would be right. A debt. The freehold of the Harrow Mill ground goes to Miss Frey and her heirs. The coal goes at cost in perpetuity, and the £70 my father refused will be paid to her with 10 years' interest, and if she throws it in the cut I shall not blame her. It does not touch the sum. Nothing touches the sum. I declined to leave it unpaid only because it was not paid before. Then he said, "Gentlemen, stand up," and 90 people stood. He rode to Harrow Mill in the dark. The furnace was going, and she came out to the yard with her sleeves rolled and her hair full of ash, and heard him to the end without a word, exactly as she had heard him out on the 12th. "You have been busy, your grace. I have been late." Every single time. He could not manage anything ornamental. I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am telling you that I shall be at that gate tomorrow and the day after, and that I should like to be there for the rest of my life, and that if you send me away the debt is paid regardless, because it is not a lever, and I will not have it used as one. Grizzle Frey looked at him a long moment in the light of her own furnace. "You had better come in," she said. "You are standing where the boy runs." They were married in the Ancroft chapel in the spring, in the morning, so that the east light was at its best, and the county came and looked and had by then had 5 months' practice. She did not give up the works, and he never once suggested it. Harrow Mill struck the red for 6 cathedrals in the next 12 years and turned out bottle glass and lamp globes between whiles. Pike's son took the gaffer's chair. The brass in the chapel carried 7 names, and the furnace did not go out. At the wedding breakfast a Bristol man, meaning well and knowing nothing, said what a pity it was that the Duchess had not been given gloves in her father's day. "She has gloves," said the Duke of Ancroft, and took his wife's bare and marked hand in both of his in front of the whole table, and kissed it, and did not put it down. "She takes them off to judge the colour. It is how one gets a true red."